Welcome back. This time, we'll talk about inverse functions. Now, if f is a one-to-one function, the inverse of f, denoted as f is the negative 1, we say that's the inverse of function f, is a function formed by reversing the ordered pairs in f. So how do we do the inverse function? If the original function is x and y, its inverse is simply interchanging the values of x and y. It becomes y and x. And here are some properties. If the inverse function exists, then the inverse function is one-to-one. If the inverse function is one-to-one, then the original function is also one-to-one. Next, the domain of the inverse function is the range of the original function. And the range of the inverse function is a domain of the original function. Again, if this is x, y, in the inverse, it becomes y, x. For example number 1, how do you find the inverse of this function g of x given these coordinates? Its inverse, denoted as g to the negative 1 of x, or we say the inverse function of g of x, is simply interchanging the x and the y coordinates. So if we have 1a, 2b, its inverse is a1, b2, up to e5. Let's take another example. Example number 2. In a table of values, these are the values of x and y. If we solve or if we represent its inverse function, we simply interchange the values of x and y. So if it's 10, 50, its inverse, it becomes 50, 10. If it's 20, 100, its inverse is 120. And the next part is how to find the inverse of each function. To find the inverse function given an equation, here are some steps. First, change f of x into y. Second, you need to interchange x and y. Then, after interchanging, you change the notation y to the negative 1. Then solve for y to negative 1 in terms of x. In the final solution, we write y to the negative 1 equals f to the negative 1 of x, and we now have the inverse function of f. In the next video, I'll show you how to do example 3, A to D.